Now I want to introduce Ms. Krissy Ahner and Ms. Stacy Ahner. Uh, I think Stacy, you're going to go first. Krissy's going to go first and talk about. This is the mother-daughter perspective on suicidality and non-suicidal self-injury, where good, loving parenting just isn't enough. Krissy's going to talk about her lived experience, as will Stacy.
Hi, my name is Krissy Ahner. Thank you for having me here today to speak on this very important issue. I can't remember when I learned what suicide was, but I do remember that by the age of 7, it occupied a significant portion of my thoughts. I vividly recall telling my mom about how, no matter the scenario I was playing, one of my Barbies inevitably killed themselves. By the age of 9, I was viewing suicide as an attractive option to escape the crippling depression that consumed me. I was 15 when I started cutting. My depression had gotten progressively worse since I was 9, and years spent talking to therapists and trying different medications had at times done little to nothing, and at others only made things worse. When I began attending Pine Ridge School in Vermont, everything came to a head. Ironically, my life was getting better in Vermont. For the first time in 7 years, I had friends, true friends, who loved me for who I was, and therein lay the problem. For the first time, I had something to lose. Before, I had spent all of my time trying to be who I thought everybody else wanted me to be, but it never worked, which just increased my sense of worthlessness. Now I had all these friends. I was, in fact, one of the more popular people in the school, a position that was entirely alien to me. I was overwhelmed, overjoyed, and desperate to keep from losing it all. I had had mild anorexia for years, a coping mechanism which at Pine Ridge quickly became worse and just as quickly ceased to be enough. The first time I cut myself was like a revelation. I cannot even describe how amazing the realization was that there was something I could do to stop the pain, that I finally had some sort of control over my life and the way I felt. Before I knew it, I was dependent on cutting. It had become an addiction, and like any other addiction, I had to continue upping the ante to keep it effective. However, cutting was merely a Band-Aid, and as the months passed, I became desperate for a more permanent solution. There are 3 stages to suicide. The first is the feeling that life is not worth living and has become too painful to bear. The second is thinking about suicide increasingly and planning how you would do it. The third and final stage is the attempt itself. I had spent most of my time over the past 7 years in stage 1. Almost every day was a struggle to live through. I would periodically enter into stage 2 and start daydreaming about suicide, how I would never have to live through another one of my emotional storms again. However, these daydreams never resulted in anything because of my vehement objections to suicide on a philosophical and moral level. Suicide, in my eyes, is taking the easy way out, a permanent solution to a temporary problem, entirely selfish, and leaving the people who love you behind to pick up the pieces. Unfortunately, those fervent beliefs were no match for my desperation to end my seemingly endless cycle of pain. And I had come to the realization that this was my life and always would be, trapped in my own private hell, utterly alone. The prospect was more than I could bear. All my hope was gone, and there was no light at the end of the tunnel. So on the night of January 20th, 2004, I finally moved on to stage 3 and attempted to end my own life. There is a tendency to dismiss the emotional pain of children and adolescents with adages like, kids are resilient, what do they have to be depressed about, teenagers are hormonal, they're being dramatic, and they're just looking for attention. This only deepens the feeling of isolation and helplessness. I was 15 when my parents sent me to Utah to a residential treatment center to get the help I so desperately needed. And I can say unequivocally that waiting until I was 18 to get both a diagnosis and proper treatment would have been a death sentence for me.